My name is Elaine Hudspeth Williford, the daughter of Elizabeth Janice Poole Hudspeth and Sidney Earl Hudspeth. It's my privilege to be able to read one of the short stories that's part of the compilation that my uncle Roger Poole has written about some of the stories from his childhood. This compilation of short stories is known as But Mama Said It. This is a picture of my grandmother, Mama, from the stories. Maxine Virile Athey Poole. The chapter I'm going to be reading today is Chapter 5, Mama Got Peaches. This is a picture of my grandmother a few years before the actual story would have taken place. And she is with her mother, Annie Sarah Taggett Athey. Mama Got Peaches. Part true and part family legend, what follows is a somewhat fictionalized account of a young girl faced with temptation and how she handled it. When my mother, Maxine Virile Athey Poole, was about 6 years old, her mother, Anna Athey, asked her to run an errand. They lived near Martinsville, Illinois at the time. The year was about 1918, and the summer crop peaches was coming in. Grandma Athey had spoken to a lady at church about peaches and how nice it would be to have some. "Come by the house and I'll give you some," she said. Grandma Athey told her she would send one of the kids over later to get those peaches. Today, Martinsville population is about 1,200. In 1918, the count was actually higher at about 1,400 people. Even so, the Athey family lived outside the city's general hustle and bustle. The Connor family, the donor of the peaches, also lived away from the city lights. The trip on foot from the Athey abode to the Connors entailed a better than average daily step count for even the most ardent of exercise freaks. 6-year-old Maxine had a long walk ahead of her. Worse yet, she would be carrying a load of big old heavy peaches on the return trip. From here on, she speaks for herself. After receiving my final instructions from Mama, little old me headed out on my journey from home. My mental map guided me down the trail from my front porch. Eventually that trail leads to a larger trail, which after a while will pass by a gate that has the Connor's name on it. In big white letters, the name is printed somewhat crudely on an old, weathered board, which might easily have been reclaimed from the side of a retired outhouse, chicken house, or other humble structure no longer serving its original purpose. There are only so many things you can do as you walk a great walk. I had about exhausted my supply of sing-song nursery rhymes, stick and rock games, and cow and chicken counting games. The time-passing games eventually gave way to things I could worry about. How much does a peach weigh? Was I supposed to bring a bag to carry them in? What if they are in a box? Won't that make it harder to carry? What if Mrs. Connors wants to be paid? I don't have any money. Will she make me work it off over a period of time? Is it just me, or did time slow down all of a sudden? I don't remember this trail being uphill so much. I'm getting tired and a little bit hungry. How much farther can it be? I think I see a gate on the side of the road ahead. It is a gate. Is it the one I'm looking for? I went to the Connors house once before. That time was with my family in a wagon. It was a party or someone got married or they had a dance. I just remember it was a little dark and it was not helpful to remember it now. I'm getting closer to the sign. Hey, I just remembered I have not started school yet and I don't know how to read. It may say Connors on that sign coming up, but how would I know that's what it says? Well, I got to the sign which hung like a misused tiara across the gated entrance to a farm. Did that word say Connors? I didn't know. But wait, beside the name was a brightly colored rendering of a beautiful tree-ripened peach. This was a peach farm. I must be at the right place. Suddenly the walking was a little easier. I entered the gate, which I sure read Connor's Peach Farm or something similar. I started up the trail that I figured would lead me to the house where I would collect the peaches that were promised to my mother. The house was not too very far from the gate. It was over a slight hill and not visible until I was about halfway between the house and the gate. From this vantage point, I could see several animals, mostly dogs, between me and the house. Most of the dogs looked friendly enough. 2 or 3 of them were chained up. Those, I figured, had a history of unfriendliness. Some of the larger friendly ones about knocked me down as they competed for my attention. Mrs. Connors came out on the porch to see what the noise was about, and with a practiced tone in her voice that the dogs understood, she hushed their noise and sent them back to their places. Each one begrudgingly lay down and curled up in as cool a spot as they could hollow out in the dirt, shielded from the afternoon heat. "Maxine, is that you, honey?" asked Mrs. Connors. "Yes, ma'am, it is." Not being one for small talk, I got right to the point. "Mama sent me for peaches." "In a hurry, are you, sweetie? I'll get them for you," she said. Mrs. Connors brought out a basket full of peaches and set them on the porch by her rocking chair. "I'll never be able to carry that home with me. I don't think I can even lift it." This I spoke in low volume with a slight bent toward whining. "Oh, honey, I just bought this out to pick over and give your mama some of the best ones. You won't have to carry them all," she said. Mrs. Connors was as good as her word. She went through the basket of peaches, examining each one. As she found one she thought to be worthy, she would lay it aside on a table next to her. Eventually they began to pile up. "I think those are more than I can carry," I said. "Oh, no," she said. "I'm separating out some for me as well. I'm going to make a cobbler. These 6 nice, big, plump ones here are for you to take to your mother." She pointed to a set of peaches that in fact did look very edible. She put them in a small cloth flour sack and said, "I'll need the sack back later if you don't mind." As I was leaving, she added, "Now don't you even think about eating those peaches before you get home." She laughed a little when she said it as though she was joking, but I think she kind of meant it. I was only 6, so any intelligible response I might have had to her admonition would only accidentally have carried with it any sarcasm. All I could come up with was, I wasn't thinking about peaches, at least not till now. I thanked Mrs. Connors for the peaches and said my goodbyes. Back down the trail I went and did my best to stay out of range of the chained dogs. The other dogs came over to say goodbye. They seemed more interested in the contents of the colorfully printed flour sack that I was carrying. They seemed to respect the boundaries of the yard and dropped away from me as quickly as they had assembled once I reached the trail proper. Free at last, I started my trek back toward home. Shade trees along my route did not stand shoulder to shoulder. The heat of the sun got hotter and hotter with each new gap between trees. I became even more eager to reach the next tree on the trail and the security of its comforting, cool shade. It was probably only my second rest stop that I began to smell the peaches. They were getting warmed by the sun, too. It occurred to me that fresh peaches really smell good. That's when I had a conversation with myself. It started with, "Maxine Verilathy, those things smell really good." "Maxine, they sure do, don't they?" "Should I look in the bag?" "Couldn't hurt to take a look." "I'm looking." "Oh my, they look and smell delicious. I'll just pick one of them up for a closer look." "Not too close to the nose. You'll be tempted to eat it." "You mean like this?" "Chomp." After several chomps later, "Oh no, I've eaten one of the peaches." "Well, we still have 5 left." "Yeah, we better get moving toward the house." The heat was not letting up, and I was about to burn up by the time we got to the next shade tree. I sat there thinking, I can't believe I ate that peach. Then I thought, I'm still hungry. I didn't have lunch except for that one peach. I took another peach out of the sack. I sniffed it. I tasted it by way of the memory of the first I ate. At least I thought it was a memory. I looked at the peach in my hand and almost jumped when I saw that half of it was gone. Heavily laden with guilt, I finished off the peach. I couldn't believe I'd eaten a second peach. Imagine my utter disbelief when farther down the road I stopped at another shade tree and once again looked into my shrinking sack load. 2 left. Only 2. Where did the others go? I could only assume that I ate them. Now there were only 2. How could I have eaten them and not even been aware of it? I must have been having a sunstroke. Since at the time I didn't know what one of those was, I was left with a fallback excuse for any child when cornered. Somebody must have stolen them. I couldn't go home with only 2 peaches. Let the record show that traffic on this trail was almost always non-existent. That didn't keep me from looking all around to check for witnesses before you guessed it, I ate the last 2 peaches. As the reader, you may be thinking to yourself, how could a 6-year-old little girl have eaten all of those peaches without extreme discomfort? Maybe they were smaller peaches than I remember. Maybe they had large pits and therefore less peach to eat. Maybe I did have some discomfort, but the guilt and pressure of making up a story to tell Mama made me overlook the pain. I don't remember the story I concocted, but I'm sure there was one. The story I made up may have contained elements of a highway robbery, or attack dogs, or even an unseen hole in the bottom of the sack. Whatever it was, the day of reckoning was certain to have come the next time Mama saw Mrs. Connors, and she asked, "How did you enjoy those peaches, Anna?" For Maxine Viral Athy Poole, Roger L. Poole, July 14th, 2018.